Hello crafters and welcome to the July 2023 Marvelous Monthly Series Video Hop by Altenew. So I am so excited to be joining in the hop again. My name is Deepa from Designs by D and I have two cards to share with you today. So I've kind of got a 2-for-1 deal crafty experience today. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I'm going to be using. So the Build a Garden for this month is this set here called Sweet Lilies. You can see it's got a gorgeous large floral bouquet. There is an add-on die that you can get that cuts out the entire floral bouquet along with the two larger sentiments. And then we've got the layering, coordinating stencils and a blending brush that comes with this kit. Now, that blending brush is not going to work with this. I've got 3 other blending brushes that I'm going to use using blues, purples, and greens for this card. Now, these are the 2 cards that were basically my inspiration. I actually created them for the release, and you can see that if you put these cards side by side, it's just one large, that entire bouquet I just cut in half. And I used 3 or 4 different colors there with soft hues. I'm going to go completely the opposite way today and make something completely vibrant. So I've got my Altenew stamp wheel. This is a godsend. I absolutely love this, if not just for the stamping, but for the stenciling. So this really comes in handy, especially with the Build-A-Garden set and any sets where you want to stamp and stencil at the same time. Now, the well within the stamp wheel is about 7.5 inches both ways, lengthways and widthwise. And I've got a piece of cardstock that is 7 inch by 7 inches. And I don't actually need it that big, but because this floral was so large, I wasn't 100% sure. So I'm just using some black pigment ink here to stamp this out because I want a nice crisp image. I don't have to worry about it being alcohol safe. I'm not doing alcohol ink coloring, I'm doing ink blending. And once I've got that stamped out, you can see the impression is pretty good, and you can just kind of flip your lid over and clean up your stamp. So I like to clean up as I go and just kind of make sure everything's put away nicely so that I don't lose anything. And you can see how nicely that sticks to that to the sticky mat there. This is the ultra sticky mat that comes with the Altenew wheel, but you can get one that's not as tacky. And I'm just going to cut off a little portion on the edge there, and you'll see why in a second. I'll return this to the stamp wheel. I'm not going to need the lid, so I'll just place that aside. And now I can just kind of take my layering stencils. This is the first stencil. They're all numbered. There are 5 of them. And as you can see for this one, there are 3 different sections. And you can see I'm just kind of sticking it down on the sticky mat there, and it just sticks. It's not going anywhere. It's perfect. It's a godsend for stenciling. So, I removed the paper to cut off that extra panel so that I would have that extra space on the edges so the stencils would stick to the mat. Now, if you had kind of measured it ahead of time and you cut that out, you wouldn't have even had to remove that paper. So I think that the biggest advantage to the Altenew stamp wheel is that sticky mat. Beyond anything else, there's a ton of other benefits. I love that sticky mat. Okay, so enough of the sticky mat. Let's move on. As you can see, so in those first 2 cards that I showed you, I'm using different colors, and the actual layering guide that comes with the stamp set is the perfect place to look. So this is it here. It's showing you where all 5 stencils get laid down, and it shows you the different bunches of colors. So you can kind of say, okay, so the red bunch of flowers in this layering guide, I'm going to make that blue, and maybe the pink ones I'm going to make green, and then you just kind of follow that that way of thinking and lining up your stencils and following the layering guide to color in your bouquet. So for this one, I'm not going to have to do that much thinking. I'm keeping it really simple. I'm just using these 2 main colors. So I've got blues and purples. I'm using a mix of deep iris and midnight violet. And I'm just using a lot of starlight blue. I really love the starlight blue because it's nice and deep. And then when you add the purple tones, it really deepens up the blue in between the 2 colors when they mix. So I'm really just taking all of the stencils where you have all the petals and just filling them in with this mix of colors. I just want a nice 2-tone flower from purple to blue. Now, for this stencil here, the second stencil, there is a portion, like a second part of the stencil where you have to kind of move the stencil and then ink that part up. That's a little close. And when this happens, I like to use something. You can use masking tape, anything. I've just got a Post-it note here to just cover that up, just so that I don't accidentally ink it up when I'm inking up the first half of the stencil here. Now, I did try to vary the colors just a little bit. I'm pretty sure in the end you can't really tell, only I can tell. But I did try to keep these flowers near the top more blue and the center flowers more purple. And you can see it all kind of coming together. Now you'll see that I'm holding down the stencil, and that's just really force of habit, because as you can see, in the areas where the stencil's touching the sticky mat, it gets a little darker, and you know that it's stuck down nicely. So I actually really don't need to keep my hand there. I'm so used to doing it. It's really something that I'm gonna have to kind of get used to, not cramping my hand in that way. It really is user friendly. Now, for the centers of the flower here, that's what this stencil is going to color in. So this is the fourth stencil. It does some of the leaves, and then the little stamen or the little anthers, I always forget which is which, for the center of the flowers. Now, I'll continue to do the leaves in more of a green color. So now I'm switching and I'm using Lagoon. I started off with the Lagoon and figured it was just a little too light, so I'll continue to do the rest of the leaves in Emerald. But then, just like the florals or the petals, I'm going to come in with that blue again. And instead of using the Starlight, I'm going to go just a little bit darker and use some Desert Night to just really deepen up those leaves. Continue that dark blue color, but just make it just a tiny bit more darker. Now, I've got a little sponge here, and I'm just adding some gold pigment ink to those little anthers or stamen in the center there. And that is because we have such deep colors. This pigment ink is going to stand out on top of it. I could have used a white pigment ink, which would have worked well as well. So the reason why I used a sponge instead of these blending brushes for the center of the flower is because I just don't have enough. And I'll be honest, I kind of missed the boat there with these blending brushes. I've only been using them recently, and I've discovered that they're absolutely amazing. I think that the shorter bristles are just a lot more effective at getting the ink on your paper, getting enough ink on it, and getting in all of those little nooks and crannies. So that is my flower, my Sweet Lilies flower bouquet, all done there. You can see that the vibrance is just amazing. Now, I just wanted to show you that my blending brushes, you could leave the ink on there, but I do like to clean them. And all I really do is just grab a little paper towel, or you could use one of your dry towels, add some water, and then just rub off the ink. Now, I have another quick tip right here. You might have seen this before or not, so this might be new to you, but this is my trick for getting that pesky ink off of your stencils. Now, these are darker inks, keep in mind. If they're lighter, it's not a big deal. I just add a bit of water and then just rub off the ink on a towel. This one seemed to be fine, but when I get to the stencils where I used the Deep Iris and the Midnight Violet, you can see that it leaves a bit of a stain. And if you are a little bit crazy about how leaving that ink on your stencil like me, all I do is just grab a bit of sanitizer, put it on a paper towel, and then just rub it over the stencil again. You'll see that it takes off all of that excess ink. I know some people make a solution in a bottle with half sanitizer, half water, and it just really works for getting off any extra ink you have, maybe even on your hands, any of your crafting products. I'm not 100% sure that it's good to use with the photopolymer stamps yet, so I would just at this point recommend not using it on them, but on your stencils for sure. So now I'm moving on, and I've got the Floral Diamond Blocks embossing folder. This came out with the July release, and I'm just adding some ink to my folder and embossing it using some blue paper. Now, I did one piece of cardstock and thought it was just a little too light, so I'm grabbing a darker blue and I'm adding the Starlight ink to the opposite side of the pan. So that would be the debossed side. And if you're wondering how you clean this off afterwards, it's the exact same thing I did with the stencil. So I'm adding some water. I'm just really filling up the wells of the folder so that I can kind of clean off any excess ink. And then if you're really, wanting to get any of that extra stubborn ink off, I would use some more sanitizer and just rub it into the panel. And then again, go back over with a bit of water just to rub off that alcohol from the sanitizer, even though it should basically just evaporate in the air. So my main reason for using that sanitizer is that if I say we're to emboss with this folder again on white, I don't want to get any ink on there at all. And you can see it comes off nicely. There's still like a little bit on the top and bottom, but it's just a stain. It's not going to come off on your paper. Now I'm doing the exact same process, but I'm doing it with some purple cardstock this time. I'm using some Andromeda ink to go on the deboss side of the folder, and then I'm going to fold it and put it through my embossing machine using my embossing mat. And you can see the results are gorgeous, just like the blue. Okay, so moving on, we're going to grab that add-on die, this nice large die to cut out that beautiful large floral bouquet. Now, I did get mine shift a little bit, but that's not really a huge deal. We're going to color in that white because the white against those darker colors is just going to be a little bit too stark. Now, I'll put that aside for a second. Let's work on the sentiment so that in the end I can get my placement right. Now I'm stamping out the two larger sentiments, which is the sending and hugs. You could use those together or use them along with all of these wonderful sub-sentiments. Now the theme of this stamp set, you could use hugs on its own, or you could use sending with maybe other sentiments from other sets to make your card a bit more generic for birthdays, for Mother's Day, for other things. Or you could use the sentiments in the stamp set, which follow the theme of condolences or, you know, thinking of you, prayers, sorry for losing your loved one, and things like that. So I'm going to try and just keep it a little bit more generic here. I'm still using the sub-sentiments from the set, but they're not as specific. And that's just because I have been fortunate enough to not have to make too many condolence cards. And if you are in the business of making condolence cards, because you unfortunately have to go through that, I'm so sorry about that, but the set, it's perfect for that because it just has the most heartfelt sentiments. Now I've gone ahead and I've heat embossed those sentiments, and I used some Altenew rose gold embossing powder, which is one of my favorites. And I'm going to go ahead and use the same embossing powder to stamp out and heat emboss those sub sentiments on some black cardstock. Now, as you can see, I placed those stamps at the top and bottom edge, and I just find that this just makes it easier for me to stamp these out, heat emboss them, and then cut them up into banners much easier than if I had stamped them, you know, one on top of the other. So I'm going to go ahead and grab those sentiment dies and just cut out those sentiments now. I've got my smaller die cutting machine to do that, and you can see they came out nicely. And now I can just go ahead and grab my guillotine cutter and just cut off these smaller bannered sub-sentiments here. And once I've got all of those kind of cut out, I can kind of work with my card panels and figure out exactly where I want to place everything. So what I'm going to do is kind of just work with all of the die cuts and pieces that I have. Now, I've been told in past videos that they appreciated the thought process behind how I put the cards together. And so I'm adding that in here. I would normally cut that out. Hopefully this helps you with your card making. Now all I'm doing is I'm using that bouquet and I'm kind of spreading it across the two cards. I put the hugs upside down because I'm thinking I want to cut this and have the layout coming from the same side. So I've kind of figured out where I want to cut that, where I want to put my sentiments, and I'm cutting this with my guillotine cutter. And then once I've cut that out, I realized I really want to cover up that white. I want this floral bouquet to look like it's coming right off that panel, but without that border. So I'm grabbing my V17, which is amethyst Copic marker, and I'm just coloring that in. And I did the same thing for the half that's going to go on the blue using B99 or agate to make sure that those mix in nicely with the panels. Now I can go ahead and assemble this. So I've got an A2 size card base. I'm adding a black card panel for my background, which is going to just give a little bit of a border around the edge. You could have just used a black card base, but I like the insides of my cards white. I'll go ahead and attach that the diamond blocks embossed panel. And I'm just going to cut up my sentiment here. So I've also cut up some strips of gold glitter cardstock. And I find that they just help the sub-sentiment stand out a little bit more. It kind of ties in the gold from the embossing on the sentiments and also in the little centers of the flowers. So I'm just adding this strip on top with the gold glitter as a border. I'm giving it a sort of like a diagonal cut just for fun. Sometimes I like to cut them straight and have it a straight banner. Sometimes I like to have the little tail, and sometimes I do the side cut. And the side cut's usually just because I'm too lazy to do the tails. So I'm positioning it so that it's kind of just above that floral grouping. I don't want to cover it too much because it's gorgeous. I really want it to show. And then I'm adding the sending on top with some foam adhesive. And I did add that floral piece with foam adhesive as well, just to give it a bit of dimension and have it pop up that card a little bit more. So now I'm going to go through the same process with the blue card here. I will add my sentiment strip, but this time I added that gold glitter piece just at the bottom rather than having it border the entire banner. It's just going to come from the bottom. And this entire banner is just going to go across the whole bottom. And then I'll have part of the florals covering that. It just creates a little bit more interest. It draws your eye. It helps the flow of the card. So you kind of look at the floral piece, you go to the sentiment, and it all kind of connects. So this is the second last part of the card, which is to add some embellishments. I've got some clear iridescent drops there, and then I've also got some matte gold pearls for the second card, just to change it up a little. And then my final step is going to be to add some highlights. So the entire card, it's vibrant, it's gorgeous, it's got nice deep colors, but like any painting or drawing, you need lowlights or your shadows, and you also need highlights. And that's my biggest I always forget to do that. So I'm taking a white jelly roll pen and I'm just adding some details with it. And this part, I think it really makes your card stand out. It makes it more unique because nobody's going to make the same marks or the same flicks like you do. And it just really, you'll see the difference with the two cards side by side, what it looks like with the highlights and without, and it just gives a more dramatic effect. So those are my two cards with one stamp inspiration that I want to share with you today. I hope that you've been inspired to create something similar. Please don't forget to check out the Altenew store for all of these kits, which are available in the shop. There is a link in the description, and as described there are prizes up for grabs. So there is a one grand prize of $100 and four $50 prizes that are up for grabs. So please do not forget to comment down below, comment on my post, the Altenew post, and all of the wonderful designers on this hop. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.